The rain hammered the stained glass windows of St. Patrick's Cathedral like a vengeful fist, drowning out the priest's eulogy in a symphony of grief and fury. Gary Harlan stood at the back, fists clenched in his pockets, watching his cousins circle Grandpa's casket like sharks scenting blood. Hypocrites who drained the old man's fortune dry under the guise of care. And then, as the organ swelled to a hollow crescendo, Nicholas squeezed his hand under the pew, whispering, "We're getting through this." But Gary knew better. The Real storm was just beginning, and it would tear them all apart before it set him free. Gary Harlan had always believed that family was the anchor in life's relentless tide, the one constant amid the chaos of New York City's unyielding pulse. But on that sodden October afternoon in 2023, as the cathedral's bells tolled like accusations, he realized how wrong he'd been. His grandfather, Elias Harlan, Elias to the world, but always just Grandpa to Gary, lay still in that polished mahogany box, his face serene under a veil of white lilies, oblivious to the vultures picking at his legacy. Gary's throat tightened, not just from the incense-heavy air, but from the weight of unspoken truths that had festered for years. He was 32, with the kind of boyish charm that lingered from his Midwestern roots despite a decade in the city that never slept. Hazel eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, a jawline softened by late-night diner runs with Nicholas, and hands calloused from freelance graphic design gigs that barely paid the rent on their cramped Brooklyn walk-up. Gary wasn't the Harlan heir everyone assumed. He was the outlier, the one who'd come out at 19 and watched his aunts and uncles exchange those pitying glances at Thanksgiving. "We'll pray for you, dear," Aunt Marjorie had said, her voice dripping saccharine concern, while Cousin Trent smirked into his turkey. Nicholas Reed, beside him now, was the counterweight to Gary's doubts. A 34-year-old history professor at NYU with wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his sharp blue eyes and a mop of chestnut hair that defied every comb. They'd met 4 years ago at a queer-lit reading in the Village, bonding over James Baldwin's raw honesty amid the clink of wine glasses. Nicholas had a way of steadying Gary, like the Hudson River's calm after a nor'easter, his touch a quiet rebellion against the world's judgments. But today, even Nicholas's presence felt fragile, a lifeline stretched thin by the Harlan family's invisible noose. The service ended in a blur of condolences and crocodile tears. Trent, the golden boy at 38, tall, broad-shouldered, with a hedge fund swagger and a Rolex that screamed old money, clapped Gary on the back a little too hard. "Tough break, cuz. Grandpa was one of a kind. We'll handle the estate stuff, don't you worry your pretty head." His wife, Lila, a Botox-smooth socialite, nodded vigorously, her diamond earrings catching the dim light like false stars. Gary forced a smile, murmuring thanks, but inside, rage simmered. Handle it? They'd been handling Grandpa's care for 5 years, ever since the Alzheimer's diagnosis turned the Harlan patriarch into a shadow of the steel magnate who'd built an empire from Pittsburgh mills to Manhattan skyscrapers. Elias Harlan had been a titan. Born in 1938 to immigrant steelworkers, he'd clawed his way through Wharton, married young to Gary's feisty grandmother, gone too soon from cancer, and raised 3 children in a brownstone off Park Avenue. But his kids, Gary's dad included, had scattered like ash, chasing their own ambitions, leaving Elias to age alone until the disease crept in. That's when the care began. A revolving door of home aides, luxury nursing homes, and essential renovations to the family estate in the Hamptons, all billed to Elias's trust. Millions, Gary knew, funneled through Trent's firm under vague line items like therapeutic excursions and memory preservation tech. Gary had protested once, via email from his desk at a failing ad agency, only to be dismissed as overly emotional. Now, as the mourners spilled onto Fifth Avenue, umbrellas blooming like black tulips, Gary lingered by the hearse. Nicholas wrapped an arm around his waist, pulling him close against the chill. "You okay?" Nicholas asked, his breath warm on Gary's ear. Gary shook his head, rain dripping from his dark hair. "They killed him, Nick. Not the Alzheimer's, the greed. And now they'll bury the evidence with him." Nicholas's grip tightened. "The will readings tomorrow. Maybe there's something in there. Grandpa always had your back." Gary wanted to believe it. Elias had been the one who'd driven from the city to Gary's cramped dorm at NYU, post coming out with a six-pack of root beer and a simple, "Love's not a transaction, kid. It's the steel in your spine." They'd fished off Coney Island piers, debated civil rights over chess in Washington Square Park, Elias's stories of marching with Baldwin in Selma weaving history into Gary's bones. But family? Elias had sighed once, over pastrami on rye. Blood's thicker than water, but it spills easier too. The cab ride back to Brooklyn was silent, the wipers slashing rhythm like a metronome to Gary's unraveling thoughts. Their apartment, a third-floor railroad flat in Bed-Stuy with peeling wallpaper and a fire escape view of stoop-sitting neighbors, was sanctuary. Nicholas kicked off his boots, brewed chamomile tea, and drew Gary onto the sagging couch, their knees knocking in that familiar, comforting way. "Tell me what you're thinking," Nicholas urged, tracing circles on Gary's palm. "That I'm done pretending." Gary's voice cracked. "Trent's already eyeing the Hamptons house like it's his birthright. And Dad. God. Dad just called from California. All condolences, and no, I'm flying out. They think I'm the weak link, the gay kid who doesn't deserve a seat at the table." Nicholas's eyes flashed, that protective fire Gary loved. "You're not weak. You're the only one who's ever seen Elias for who he was. Not a checkbook, but a man." He leaned in, forehead to forehead, their breaths mingling. "And you deserve everything. We both do." The kiss that followed was soft, anchoring. A promise forged in 4 years of subway, rides home from protests, late-night syllabus grading sessions, and quiet Sundays sketching in Prospect Park. Nicholas tasted like salt and resolve, his hands framing Gary's face as if to say, "This is real. We're real." For a moment the world outside, the Harlan vultures, the empty trust, faded. But dawn brought the summons. 10 a.m. at the family lawyer's office on Wall Street. Gary dressed in his one good suit, a thrift store find tailored just right, and knotted his tie with trembling fingers. Nicholas drove him downtown in their rattling Subaru, the radio tuned low to NPR's morning brief on inflation and queer rights rollbacks. "Call me after," Nicholas said, parking illegally curbside. "Whatever happens, I'm here." The office was a fortress of mahogany and leather-bound ledgers, smelling of scotch and old money. Trent and Lila arrived fashionably late, trailed by Aunt Marjorie, her pearls clacking like judgments, and Uncle Victor, Gary's dad's estranged brother, nursing a scotch despite the hour. Gary's father, Robert, had zoomed in from L.A., his pixelated face a ghost on the lawyer's screen, bearded, distant, claiming production schedules for his indie films. Elliot Grayson, the family attorney since Elias's heyday, cleared his throat, his bow tie askew. Elias Harlan's last will and testament, executed last spring with full cognizance despite his condition, will proceed clause by clause. The room tensed as Grayson intoned the preliminaries. Bequests to charities, NAACP, Stonewall Foundation, a nod to Elias's progressive soul. Then the estate, the Hamptons compound, the Manhattan Co-op, shares in Harlan steel remnants. Gasps rippled as Grayson detailed the care fund diversions. $4.2 million siphoned over 5 years, ostensibly for Elias's twilight years but logged as everything from private jets to experimental therapies that never materialized. Trent shifted, his loafers creaking. "That's preposterous. Those were legitimate expenses." According to audits Elias commissioned independently, Grayson interrupted, sliding folders across the table. Only 18% reached his care. The rest? Misallocated. Fraudulent, even. Marjorie's hand flew to her chest. "Elias would never." "He did," Grayson said flatly. "And he provided for recourse." Gary's heart pounded. Recourse? Elias had known. All those bedside chats, the old man's grip on Gary's hand during hospital visits. "Hold the line, son." It wasn't delirium. It was strategy. Grayson adjusted his glasses. The bulk of the estate, $28 million liquid assets, properties appraised at $15 million, goes to Gary Harlan, sole beneficiary, with instructions to establish the Elias Harlan Foundation for LGBTQ+ youth advocacy and elder care reform. The room erupted. Trent slammed a fist on the table. This is bullshit, Gary. The one who parades his lifestyle. Elias was senile. Language, Trent, Grayson warned, but his eyes twinkled. The will includes affidavits from 3 neurologists confirming Elias's lucidity. And a video. He cued the laptop. Elias appeared on screen, frail but fierce in a hospital gown. His voice gravel over thunder. If you're watching, it means I've crossed over. To my blood. You failed me, not with neglect, but with avarice. You turned my golden years to dross. Gary, my boy, you've the heart I wish I'd given my own. Take it all. Build something true. And remember, justice isn't vengeance. It's the dawn after the storm. Tears blurred Gary's vision. The accusations flew. Trent red-faced, Marjorie wailing, Robert's Zoom feed frozen in shock. But Gary sat still, the weight lifting like fog over the East River. Justice, Elias had said. Not for spite, but for healing the fractures. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, Gary slipped out, hailing a cab to Brooklyn. Nicholas waited on the stoop, coffee in hand. Well? Gary pulled him into a crushing hug. It's ours, Nick. All of it. And a mission. Nicholas laughed, a sound like sunlight breaking clouds. Then let's get to work. But as they climbed the stairs, Gary's phone buzzed. A text from Trent. This isn't over. You'll regret crossing us. The storm, it seemed, had only gathered force. The days blurred into a whirlwind of legal filings and media whispers. The New York Post ran a splashy headline, Harlan airs gay grand slam, $43 million windfall exposes family fraud. And suddenly, Gary's inbox overflowed with interview requests, from CNN's earnest correspondents to podcasters chasing scandal. He ignored most, holing up in the apartment with Nicholas, poring over foundation blueprints on legal pads stained with takeout grease. The Elias Harlan Foundation. Scholarships for queer kids in foster care, hospices for elders forgotten by kin, a beacon in the city's concrete canyons. Nicholas dove in headfirst, his academic mind mapping bylaws and outreach. We'll partner with GLSEN, maybe Lambda Legal, he'd say over midnight ramen, his glasses fogging from the steam. Make it Elias's legacy. Unapologetic, unbreakable. Gary loved him for it. That fierce intellect wrapped in quiet devotion. Their evenings stretched long, bodies entwined on the fire escape under starless skies, talking dreams. A house upstate with a garden. Adoptions maybe. A life beyond survival. But the Harlans wouldn't fade quietly. Trent sued first, claiming undue influence. Gary had poisoned Elias with deviant propaganda. Marjorie joined, alleging elder abuse via emotional manipulation. Robert, ever the absentee, filed a countersuit from L.A., demanding his moral share for past contributions. The tabloids feasted. Family feud. Gay grandson steals fortune from ailing patriarch? Gary's first public stand came at a press conference in Foley Square, rain-slicked steps mirroring that funeral day. Flanked by Grayson and Nicholas, he gripped the podium, voice steady despite the knot in his gut. My grandfather wasn't stolen from. He was betrayed by those who swore to protect him. This isn't about money. It's about dignity. For elders like Elias, for queer youth like I was, fighting for scraps in a world that deems us unworthy. Cameras flashed like lightning. A reporter shouted, Mr. Harlan, rumors say your relationship influenced the will. Nicholas stepped forward, arm brushing Gary's. Love doesn't write wills. Character does. And Elias saw Gary's clearly. The clip went viral, hashtags blooming. Justice for Elias, Harlan Truth. Allies emerged. Activists from ACT UP remnants, donors from the glitterati. But so did the hate. Voicemails laced with slurs, eggs splattered on their door. One night, returning from a foundation donor meet at a Soho loft, they found the Subaru keyed with a jagged FT. Inside, Gary paced the kitchenette, fists balled. They're winning, Nick, turning me into the villain. Nicholas caught his wrists, pulling him close. They're scared. Because you're not just taking the money, you're rewriting the story. His lips brushed Gary's temple, a feather-light anchor. And I'm in it with you. All the way. That night, they made love slowly, deliberately, not as escape but affirmation. Bodies familiar as old maps, mapping trust in the dim glow of street lamps. Afterward, curled against Nicholas's chest, Gary whispered, "What if this breaks us?" The pressure. "It won't." Nicholas's fingers threaded through Gary's hair. "Because we're not them. We're us." Dawn brought a breakthrough. Grayson's team unearthed emails. Trent's firm billing $200,000 for a yacht therapy session that was really a Monaco jaunt. The judge, a no-nonsense Brooklynite named Rivera, slapped down the suits as frivolous, awarding Gary court costs. Victory tasted bittersweet, champagne flat on his tongue at the celebratory toast with Foundation board members. Trent cornered him post-hearing in the courthouse lobby. Face modeled. "You think this ends it? Dad, our real family will cut you off for good." Gary met his gaze, unflinching. "Family isn't blood, Trent. It's choice. And Elias chose me." Driving home through the Queens Midtown Tunnel, Nicholas glanced over. "Proud of you back there." Gary smiled faintly. Felt like channeling Grandpa. Steel spine and all. But cracks spiderwebbed. Nicholas's tenure review loomed, colleagues side-eyeing his distraction with the Harlan drama. Gary's freelance dried up, clients wary of controversy. Whispers followed. Gold digger? Even allies questioned motives. One donor, a silver-haired philanthropist at a gala, pulled Gary aside. "Admirable cause, but honey, marry for love, not leverage." The barb lodged deep. That night, over wine on the couch, Gary voiced it. "Do you ever wonder if I'm holding you back?" Nicholas set his glass down, eyes narrowing. "Where's this coming from?" "The looks, the questions. We're the poster boys for tragic queers fighting the man. But what if it's just pity porn?" Nicholas's laugh was sharp, pained. "Bullshit. I chose you because you're fire, Gary, burning through the lies. If anyone's holding back, it's me, dragging you into my ivory tower neuroses." They argued then, words tumbling like loose change. Nicholas's fear of irrelevance, Gary's guilt over the spotlight. It peaked with shouts. "You're using this for your book." From Gary, "And you're scared of your own shadow." From Nicholas, ending in slammed doors and a night on separate sides of the bed. Morning brought regret, apologies over burnt toast. "I hate fighting," Gary murmured, tracing Nicholas's knuckles. "Me too," Nicholas sighed. "But it's how we grow." Like Elias said, dawn after the storm. Reconciliation was tentative. A walk through McCarran Park where dog walkers and joggers blurred the edges. They recommitted, therapy sessions via Zoom, date nights at hole-in-the-wall jazz spots. The foundation launched its pilot, $500K to a Bronx shelter for queer elders, and Gary spoke at the ribbon cutting, voice raw. "Elias taught me family isn't inherited. It's forged. In the quiet choices, the hands held in the dark." Applause thundered, Nicholas beaming from the front row. But as Gary stepped down, his phone vibrated. A voicemail from an unknown number. "Mr. Harlan? This is Dr. Lena Voss from Cedars-Sinai. Regarding Nicholas Reed. We need to talk. It's urgent." Gary's blood chilled. "Nicholas? What the hell?" He pocketed the phone. Smile plastered for photos, but inside, dread coiled like smoke. Secrets had a way of surfacing just like Elias's will, and this one felt poised to shatter everything. Gary poured a scotch, Elias's brand, peaty and punishing, and sank onto the couch, scrolling Nicholas's socials for clues. Nothing but syllabus posts and cat memes from their neighbor's tabby. Paranoia crept. Was it the stress? The arguments? Or something deeper? A betrayal Gary couldn't name? Nicholas arrived at 10, key jangling, face lit by his phone's glow. "Hey, you beat me back. How was the drive?" Gary hesitated, glass midway to his lips. "Fine, but I got a weird call. From a doctor in LA. About you." Nicholas froze, coat half off. "What?" "Dr. Lena Voss said it's urgent." Gary's voice edged toward accusation. unbidden. Color drained from Nicholas's face. A pallor Gary hadn't seen since his own coming-out panic. Shit. I didn't want you finding out like this. Out? Finding out what? Gary stood, scotch sloshing. The room shrank, walls pressing like the tunnel's concrete. Nicholas sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. It's my heart. Congenital thing, mitral valve prolapse. Pops up under stress, meds keep it in check. But last month, during the suits, it flared. Flew to LA for a consult with Voss. She's the specialist Dad knew from academia. Tests, echoes, the works. She wants follow-ups. Gary's knees buckled. He dropped beside Nicholas, hand hovering before clasping his. Why didn't you tell me? We could've. Cancelled the foundation launch? Rushed you to hospital's mid-gala? Nicholas's laugh was bitter. You were carrying the world, Gary. I didn't want to add my baggage. Baggage? Gary's whisper cracked. We're partners, not props in each other's stories. Nicholas's eyes glistened. I know. I fucked up. Thought I could handle it solo, like always. But seeing you up there today, owning the stage. God. It hit me. We're in this together or not at all. The confession unspooled over hours. Nicholas's childhood hiding the condition from overachieving parents. The flare-ups during his PhD defense that nearly derailed him. Met you right after a bad episode, he admitted, voice soft. That reading? I was on beta blockers, heart racing like a freight train. You quoted Baldwin. Love takes off the masks. And I thought, finally, someone sees me. Gary pulled him close, tears hot on his cheeks. No more masks. Promise. Promise. Nicholas's kiss was salt-streaked, fervent. A vow renewed in vulnerability. But dawn brought reality's bite. Gary insisted on the follow-up. Tickets to LA, foundation duties delegated. The flight west was tense. Nicholas fidgeting with his tray table. Gary white-knuckling the armrest. LAX sprawled under smoggy skies. A far cry from Manhattan's grit. Voss's office in Beverly Hills gleamed sterile, white coats. EKG machines humming like judgmental bees. You're stable, Voss assured after the echo, her German accent crisp. But stress is the trigger. Cut the cortisol, meditation, therapy, maybe a sabbatical. She eyed Nicholas. And tell your partner next time. Secrets kill faster than valves. Back at Robert's guest house. Awkward truce, the prodigal son hosting. Gary confronted his father over poolside margaritas. Robert, tanned and tousled in linen, swirled his glass. Nick's condition? Tough break. But you're strong, kid. Like Elias. Strong. Gary snorted. You bailed when he needed you. And now this lawsuit? For what validation? Robert's face crumpled, the Hollywood facade cracking. I was scared, Gary, of failing him like I failed you. After Mom, I ran to scripts and spotlights. But the suit? It's not greed. It's regret. Elias cut me out for a reason. The admission hung heavy, stars pricking the canyon sky. For the first time, Gary saw his father not as ghost but man, flawed, reaching. Drop the suit, Gary said finally. Help build the foundation instead. From afar, if that's your style. Robert nodded, clinking glasses. Deal. Return to New York felt lighter, the Harlan specter dimming. Trent's appeals crumbled under forensic accounting. Marjorie settled for a pittance, slinking to Palm Beach. The foundation's first grants rolled out. $100K to a Harlem center for trans elders. Stories of reclaimed lives flooding Gary's inbox like bomb. Nicholas, too, mended reduced course load, joint therapy where they unpacked masks. Gary's fear of abandonment, Nicholas's lone wolf armor. Evenings bloomed romantic. Candlelit picnics in Central Park. Nicholas reading poetry under willows. Gary sketching his profile in charcoal. Lines soft with wonder. Yet undercurrents stirred. A foundation donor dinner at the Polo Lounge. Ironic, given the sports stuffiness. Brought Lila, Trent's ex. Now an independent ally. Tipsy on Merlot, she cornered Gary in the powder room. Trent's unraveling, you know. Booze, affairs, the will broke him. But you? Careful, darling. Power changes lovers. Gary brushed it off as sour grapes, but the seed burrowed. Nicholas seemed distant lately. Late calls from colleagues. Eyes darting during pillow talk. Was it the health scare? Or something uglier? A betrayal echoing the families? The question gnawed until a rainy Tuesday. Gary home early from a grant meeting. Nicholas's laptop lay open on the kitchen table, screen aglow. Emails to a J. Whitaker, NYU adjunct. Missed you last night. Drink soon? Our secret's safe. Attached. A photo, Nicholas and a younger man. Lean, laughing, in a dimly lit bar, arms slung, casual, intimate. Gary's world tilted. Betrayal raw as a gut punch. He slammed the laptop shut, heart hammering. Not from love, but rage. The Harlans had taught him greed. Nicholas, he'd thought, loyalty. But secrets, it seemed, ran deeper than blood. The photo burned into Gary's retinas like acid. Each pixel a fresh wound. Our secret's safe. What secret? The bar, some village dive, time-stamped 3 weeks back. During Gary's solo Hamptons retreat to sort Elias's papers. Nicholas had claimed grading marathon. But here he was, grinning with this Whitaker Jordan Gary guest, from the adjunct roster he'd once glimpsed. Lithe, with tousled blonde hair and a poet's intensity. The kind that turned heads at faculty mixers. Gary's hands shook as he forwarded the chain to his phone. Evidence stacking like indictments. More emails. Can't stop thinking about our talk. You're the spark I needed. From Nicholas. Flattered, but Gary. Complicated. Flattered? Complicated? Rage boiled, hot and clarifying. He stormed out, pounding Brooklyn sidewalks until lungs burned. Rain mingling with tears. Elias's voice echoed. Justice is dawn, not storm. But this storm felt endless. Lightning forking through his chest. Home by midnight, the apartment dark save Nicholas's desk lamp. He sat hunched, marking essays, oblivious. Gary hovered in the doorway, words congealing like tar. Long day, Nicholas asked, glancing up. Smile faltering at Gary's sodden stance. Who's Jordan Whitaker? Gary's voice was ice, flat as a blade. Nicholas paled, pen clattering. Gary. Saw the emails. The photo. Our secret. Gary tossed his phone onto the table, screen glaring accusation. How long? Nicholas buried his face in hands. It's not what God. Nothing happened. We talked, that's all. After my checkup, I spiraled. Met him at a conference panel on queer historiography. Harmless drinks. Venting about the pressure. Venting. Gary's laugh was hollow. Into can't stop thinking about you? A flirtation. Stupid, ego-stroking bullshit. Nicholas stood, reaching, but Gary recoiled. I shut it down. Told him about us, the foundation, everything. It was a weak moment, Gary. The health scare, the suits. I felt invisible. Invisible. Gary's voice rose, echoing off peeling walls. I'm fighting for us. For Elias's ghost. And you're bar hopping with some adjunct crush? Nicholas's eyes welled. You're right. Panicked. Thought if I could feel. Desired, separate from the chaos, it'd ground me. But it was a lie. You're my ground. The fight raged. Accusations hurled like grenades. Betrayer. Like Trent. From Gary. Suffocating savior complex. From Nicholas. Plates shattered, voices cracked. Until exhaustion dropped them onto the rug, spent and sobbing. I love you, Nicholas whispered, broken. Only you. Let me fix this. Gary wanted to believe, but trust fractured like glass underfoot. How? When every glance feels like a lie. Therapy became triage. Sessions with Dr. Patel, a soft-spoken queer therapist in Chelsea, unpacking the betrayal's roots. Nicholas owned it, full disclosure, blocking Jordan transparency apps on phones. Gary dug into his own shadows. Abandonment from Robert, the Harlan disdain, how it primed him for paranoia. Rebuilding was glacial. Date nights tentative. Dinners at their old haunt, Angelo's, where marinara masked the awkward pauses. Nicholas's gestures piled. Handwritten letters slipped into Gary's sketchbook, You're my north. Always. The foundation surged ahead, a distraction and tether, grand opening gala at the New York Historical Society. Proceeds funding 10 new scholarships. The event glittered. Chandeliers dripping light, donors in tuxes mingling with activists. Gary keynote, voice steady. Elias Harlan believed in second chances. Not excuses, but accountability. That's the foundation's heart. Mending what greed and fear tear asunder. Applause swelled, Nicholas's eyes shining from the wings. Post-gala, in a cab uptown, Nicholas squeezed Gary's hand. You were brilliant. Proud doesn't cover it. Gary leaned into him, the old warmth flickering. We were. Together. But fate, cruel jester, twisted the knife. Weeks later, a certified letter arrived, Jordan Whittaker, suing Nicholas for defamation. Claiming the breakup emails painted him as a predator, tanking his adjunct gig. Tabloids sniffed blood. Harlan lovers scandal. Adultery or assault? The irony stung. Gary, architect of justice, now defending his partner's mess. Depositions dragged. Jordan, tearful on stand, admitting pursuit but swearing Nicholas encouraged. Nicholas, resolute. I sought solace, not seduction. Mistake mine, but no malice. Gary testified last. Raw honesty. Love's messy. We falter, but we choose repair. Jordan's suit? Vengeance, not vindication. The judge dismissed, citing lack of evidence. But the mud stuck. Whispers at board meetings, donors hedging bets. Through it, Nicholas unraveled. Nightmares of loss, valve flaring under stress. Gary nursed him. Midnight air runs, broth and Baldwin readings. But resentment simmered. Am I enough? Gary journaled one night, pen slashing. Or just the fix for your fractures? Climax brewed at the foundation's first anniversary. A Hudson River cruise under autumn sails. Guests aboard. Elders sharing testimonies, youth performing spoken word. When Trent appeared uninvited, drunk and disheveled, cornering Gary on deck. You ruined us. Trent slurred, breath whiskey sour. Elias's money bought your fairy tale, but Nick? He's trash. Like you. Nicholas intervened, shoving Trent back. Back off, Harlan. Your poison ends here. Fists flew. Trent swinging wild, Nicholas dodging. Gary pulling them apart as crew swarmed. Bruises bloomed. Nicholas's split lip, Trent's black eye. Cops hauled Trent away, charges pending, but the damage etched deeper. In the aftermath, medics aboard. Gary bandaged Nicholas's hand. Why'd you jump in? Because he's wrong. Nicholas winced, cupping Gary's cheek. You're not trash. You're treasure. And I almost lost you proving otherwise. The words cracked Gary open. Under stars wheeling over Jersey, he kissed Nicholas. Fierce. Forgiving. No more almosts. We're steel now like Elias. But dawn's light revealed shadows. A detective's card slipped under their door. Trent's arrest uncovered more. Embezzlement ties to Jordan. A paid smear to destabilize the foundation. Betrayal's web widened. Ensnaring allies. Justice, Gary realized, demanded one final stand. The detective's card bore Lieutenant Maria Callahan's name, NYPD Financial Crimes, her number scrawled like a summons to judgment. Gary stared at it over coffee, steam curling like questions unanswered. Trent's brawl wasn't rage's endgame. It was a desperate Hail Mary, unraveling threads of a larger deceit. Callahan met them at a midtown precinct, fluorescent hum underscoring her noble shit demeanor. 40s, badge polished, coffee stain on her blouse. Trent Harlan didn't act alone, she said, flipping files. Your cousin's firm? Shell companies, laundered through offshore trusts. Jordan Whittaker? Not just a jilted lover, paid operative. $50,000 wired post-gala. Time-stamped to consulting on your emails. Nicholas leaned forward, knuckles white. He targeted me? To what? Bring down Gary. Callahan nodded. Classic disruption. Harlan blood's deep in grudge. Trent's drowning in debt. Post-divorce. Your windfall? Trigger. He looped in Whittaker via a queer networking app. Ironic, huh? To infiltrate. Flirt, extract dirt, leak to press. But you lawyered up fast. Suit backfired. Gary's stomach churned. Betrayal layered. Family greed. Lover's lapse weaponized. Elias's audits. Did they miss this? Missed the peripherals. Callahan slid photos. Trent and Jordan. Blurry meet in a Tribeca cafe. But your foundation's grants? They've got eyes, advocacy groups tipping us. We're building RICO ties. Need your testimony, records. Full cooperation. They agreed, the precinct's chill seeping into bones. Outside, rain lashed Columbus Circle, tourists scattering. Nicholas hailed a cab, arm around Gary. This ends it, right? God, I hope. Gary buried his face in Nicholas's shoulder, scent of wool and resolve. But doubt gnawed. How many fissures remained? The probe accelerated, a machine grinding bones. Grayson coordinated with feds. Foundation paused grants, board huddling in virtual war rooms. Gary and Nicholas retreated to the Hamptons estate. Elias's bequest, now theirs. A shingled sanctuary overlooking dunes, waves whispering absolution. There, amid salt air and cedar beams, they rebuilt. Mornings. Yoga on the widow's walk, Nicholas leading poses with newfound gentleness. His valve monitored by a home kit. Afternoons. Walks on empty beaches, collecting sea glass, emerald, cobalt, symbols of shards mended. Evenings. Fireside talks, Elias's journals unearthed from attic trunks. 1963 Selma. Marched with brothers of all stripes. Loves the bridge, not the wall. One night, embers glowing, Nicholas knelt by the hearth. Gary Harlan, you've weathered my storms, carried my secrets. Marry me? Not for show, but steel unbreakable. Gary's breath caught, tears pricking. The ring, simple platinum, engraved dawn after, slipped onto his finger like fate's quiet click. Yes, 1,000 times. Engagement news leaked, joy amid scandal, drawing well wishes from allies, silence from Robert. But the wedding planning became therapy. Small, beachside, guests handpicked, Dr. Patel officiating, foundation kids as ring-bearers. Invites omitted Harlan's, a boundary drawn in sand. Yet climax loomed. Callahan's raid netted Trent in his penthouse. Servers seized, ledgers spilling like confetti. Jordan flipped first, plea deal for testimony. Trent promised exposure, ruin the foundation, reclaim the will. I was broke, bitter. Nicholas shut me down. I lashed out. Trial opened in federal court, Manhattan's Gravity Well. Gary testified second day, suit crisp, voice unflinching. Elias's will wasn't punishment. It was prophecy. Greed devours, but truth endures. Trent, shackled and shrunken, glared from the dock. Once titan, now felon. Nicholas's turn gutted, recounting the flirtation, not as shame but lesson. I sought escape, found only mirrors. Betrayal taught me. Love demands vigilance, not perfection. Jurors, diverse faces, queer and straight, nodded, empathy etching lines. Verdict. Guilty, 15 years, restitution ordered. $3.2 million clawed back for the foundation. Marjorie and Victor copped pleas, fines stripping veneers. Robert appeared last, unbidden, in the gallery, letter in hand. Proud of the man you've become. If you'll have me, I'd walk you down the aisle. Gary forgave tentatively, a call, plans for coffee. Justice, Elias's brand, wasn't erasure. It was reckoning with room for grace. Wedding day dawned golden, June 2024, dunes carpeted in wild roses. 50 guests. Survivors, scholars, kids with futures funded by Harlan Hope. Gary in linen, barefoot, Nicholas in seersucker, glasses glinting. Vows exchanged under a driftwood arch. In storms and dawns, I choose you. Rings exchanged, kisses sealed, salt-kissed, eternal. Reception spilled onto the lawn. Barbecue, blues band, toasts to Elias. A youth, 17 and trans, pulled Gary aside. Your story? It gave me mine. Nicholas watched, arm linked, whispering, "We did that." But as twilight deepened, a shadow fell. Callahan's follow-up. One loose end, Robert Harlan. His LA films? Shell for Trent's laundered cash. He's complicit. Gary's joy fractured. Father, again? The man inching back, now tainted. Confrontation came sunset. Beachside. Robert, contrite in khakis. I knew bits, investments for the suits. Thought I could shield you. Shield? Gary's voice broke. By lying? Again? Robert wept, sand gritting knees. I'm poisoned, son. Always was. Take the restitution. Disown me. Nicholas mediated, hand on Gary's back. Choice, Gary. Justice or mercy? The dilemma clawed. Indict and shatter the fragile bridge. Spare and compromise truth. Elias's journal burned in pocket. Blood spills easy, but forgiveness? That's the forge. Gary stood at the tide's edge, waves lapping like unanswered pleas. Robert's silhouette hunched against the horizon. The wedding's afterglow faded. Laughter from the lawn a distant hum. Nicholas's gaze a steady beacon 50 yards back. Mercy or justice? Elias's forge demanded both. But Gary's heart, scarred and stubborn, teetered. I won't testify against you, Gary said finally, voice carried on salt wind. But no more half-truths. The money, funnel it clean to the foundation. And stay away until you earn it. Robert's nod was a bow, broken but bowed. Fair. I love you, boy, even if I forget how to show it. He rose, trudging toward his rental, a ghost receding into dusk. Gary returned to Nicholas, collapsing into his embrace. Chose the dawn. Messy one. Nicholas kissed his temple. Elias would approve. Now, dance with your husband before the cake melts. The night spun joyful. Slow dances to Coltrane, kids chasing fireflies, toasts laced with hope. Under stars, Gary and Nicholas slipped away to the dunes. Blankets spread, oceans roar a lullaby. Married, Gary murmured, tracing Nicholas's ring. Feels like flying. With anchors, Nicholas replied, pulling him close. Us. Months wove forward, threads of renewal. The foundation, bolstered by restitution, expanded. Satellite centers in LA, Pittsburgh, elders co-ops blending care with community. Gary helmed it full-time, graphic skills crafting campaigns that went viral. Forge Your Family, stories of queer kinships blooming amid ruins. Nicholas's book, Shadows of Selma, queer threads in civil rights, dedicated to Elias and Gary, hit shelves to acclaim. His health stabilized, valve a footnote in routine check-ins. They adopted a rescue mutt, Luna, fuzzy guardian of their upstate cottage, bought with first royalties. Robert flickered in peripheries. Quarterly checks wired anonymously, a letter monthly. Apologies evolving to anecdotes, his films pivoting to docu-series on elder rights. No visits, but bridges mended slow like rusting steel. Trent's appeals failed. Prison mail came filtered, rage cooling to regret. You were right, cuz. Blood's not enough. Gary burned most, replied to one, build something in there. For Elias. One crisp November Eve, 2025. 2 years post-will. Gary and Nicholas hosted a foundation gala at the Hamptons estate. Lanterns strung like constellations. Guests. Elders who'd found homes, youth launching lives, even Marjorie. Humbled, donating her pearls for auction. Gary's speech capped the night, overlooking dunes. Elias Harlan's will wasn't a weapon. It was a window, to truths we'd shuddered, loves we'd dimmed. It cost us, betrayals, bruises, but gifted justice. Not punishment, but possibility. For the forgotten, the fierce, the families we choose. Thunderous cheers, Nicholas's hand in his, squeezing. As violins swelled, a figure approached. Robert, unannounced, suit rumpled, eyes hopeful. Mind if I join the dance? Gary hesitated, then extended a hand. One step at a time. They swayed awkward, father and son, reclaiming rhythm. Nicholas cutting in, trio laughing as waves crashed approval. Later, bonfire crackling, Gary pulled Nicholas aside. "Think Elias is watching? Smirking at the mess we made beautiful?" Nicholas grinned, firelight dancing in his eyes. "Bet he's toasting with root beer to steel spines and second dawns." In that moment, under a sky vast as forgiveness, Gary knew the storm had passed. Not unscathed, scars etched deep, lessons hard won, but whole. Love, Elias had taught, wasn't blood's monopoly. It was the quiet forge, hammering chaos into grace. And in Nicholas's arms, Gary's hand over his husband's heart, steady, sure. He felt it beat, unbreakable, eternal. The end? No, beginnings, plural. For the Harlans reborn, the foundations rising, the loves that endured. Justice restored, not in ledgers but legacies, human humming home.